Let me welcome you to this evening's presentation of Mango Tree Dialogues. As you know, this is a forum in which we seek to distill the issues of the day. And this evening we're going to Jamaica to look at some of the things that have been happening there with particular reference to two matters that are on my mind. But before I do so, you will recall the last time I was with you, we talked about the papacy, the death of Pope Francis. And we talked about the contribution that he has made to the life of the church. Not just the Roman Catholic Church, but the church in general, and how he brought a sense of reformation, if I should put it that way, a kind of newness to what had become rather, fossilized structure of the Roman Catholic magisterium, so to speak. But anyway, his funeral was held, and what a glorious send-off for a humble man of God. Now, today, we have had the election of a new pope, and he is Cardinal Robert Prevost from Chicago, an American, of course. So it is the very first time in the history of the papacy that an American has been elected to be pope. And it's quite a very interesting time, for him as an American to be elected as the head of the 1.4 billion Roman Catholic community throughout the world. It's got to be a very challenging time for him. He's still a young man, relatively young person at 69. And so he'll have barring any unforeseen circumstances arising in his life, illnesses or anything like that, he should have a very long run. People have been even surmising whether the election of the of an American had anything to do with the president of the United States hand, being in it, in some form. He's already congratulating the new pope, and the way the congratulation went, it would give the impression, that he said, it was a great honor, as if to indicate that the honor is also due to him. I hope I'm not reading that, the wrong way, but so I won't go down that too far. But it is very interesting because since the Pope has been elected, there are certain articles that people have already begun to dig into his past. And it is emerging that he was quite a social media, I'm not going to say enthusiast, but he did a lot of tweeting. His Twitter finger was very busy, and many times he criticized, especially the first Trump administration and recently the immigration policy of Mr. Trump. And, he's from Chicago, where I guess he would intersect with a lot of immigrants. And what he had to say is very, I guess the GOP, I understand that the Republican Party itself has already gotten up in arms, so to speak, about some of the things that he has tweeted now that they are emerging and now that he's Pope. Of course, you're not going to be noticed when you do not hold that kind of power, but now that you have it, and this is the sort of thing that you're going to get. So we'll see, how things emerge and how he comports himself and what finally becomes of the whole idea of him, doing the work of the papacy in the context of these new realities in which we find ourselves. All right, but I just thought I would mention that, but that is not the gravamen of our discussion this evening. Um, it's a historical thing, what you could call it breaking news if you want. But it's a very important development in the Roman Catholic Church and in religion in the world. And we here at Mango Tree Dialogues want to wish the Pope all the very best, that he will be given the necessary wisdom and courage and boldness to speak with eloquence and humility to the issues of the day. There has never been a time, perhaps in our own lifetime, that demands this sense of being able to speak boldly to negative things that are often of a demonic characteristic, lack of any kind of moral accountability for actions that are done, the criminality that is rampant, the lack of compassion for the neighbor, the lack of concern for the elderly and for children, and wars that are being fought that are destroying whole civilizations in the Ukraine and in the Middle East and parts of Africa. So it's a very testing time. So he's going to need all our prayers. So all the best, Cardinal Prevost. Now Pope Leo XIV, he has taken that name. And Pope Leo, it is understood, was someone who was very concerned about workers. So we will see what direction our brother in Christ takes. All right, so Jamaica. There are two things that have been on my mind recently. And one has to do again with that very important, yet not so much talked about issue of constitutional reform. And I'll tell you why I say it's not talked about. Yes, a few talking heads like myself who are vested or interested in the subject, and others in civil society, we talk about this issue because it is very important to us. Yes, the government people who are in charge of running the process of reform, they too have to talk to it. But somehow the general population, it would appear to me, would not care less. But I don't want to say that because they have not been informed. And one cannot take a position on a subject that one is not even informed on. And I'm going to be talking to that a little bit more because this has been one of the biggest flaws in the process that has been engaged by the government through the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Ministry and under the Constitutional Reform Committee that was appointed to carry the process. From the very beginning of the appointment of the different functionaries on the committee, some of us, at least, I had raised the issue of the number of legal representatives, lawyers, who were on the committee. And I guess, I don't want to belabor this, but I guess when it comes to constitutional matters, matters of great legal, import, have to be considered. So the committee might have thought that if you overlay it with lawyers, then you would get a better outcome. But I'm not sure about that. And that had been one of my concerns. But of even more important concern for me is that the way the government has approached the matter is to give the impression, and the way that the committee has conducted itself over the time frame that it did before it made its report to Parliament, is to give the impression, and more than an impression, that the process is more government-centered than it is people-centered. What do I mean by this? I don't know if you're going to have a constitutional reform process, whether the government itself should be involved at the level at which they are involved. And that is why it should not be surprising that you have this kind of government-centric approach to the problem, if it is, to the process. And the people largely pushed to the periphery, largely marginalized. And I know that the committee is going to tell me that, that's not true. They have engaged people, they have meetings. Yes, you've had a few selected meetings in different parts of the country, but how many people were in attendance? How many advertisements we have had on the main media and social media and all over the place talking about constitutional reform? How exercised are the people of Jamaica about this process? How do they feel about it? I was just going along the street one day, and I just made a quick random check with people and ask about, what do you know about constitutional reform in Jamaica? People would almost laugh me to scorn and look at this as if I'm a man from Mars. Constitutional reform. And I guess if you talk to them, to a lot of people, they'll tell you that what is constitutional reform? Constitutional reform is like a distraction. It's like a waste of time. Constitutional reform can't nyam. Some may tell you. But the real point I'm making is this, that the government, that the committee itself has not engaged the public in the kind of robust way to get them sensitized and, energized to be active participants in the process. And I dare any of the members to contradict what I'm saying here, because it is a fact. Go through the length and breadth of Jamaica and talk glibly to or openly to any group that you run into, and you see how many of them know anything at all about constitutional reform. They haven't even heard the nomenclature, the name, constitutional reform, much less to talk about what it is about, how does it affect their lives, how is it can improve their circumstances, how is it that we can have accountable governance in the country, because that is where it's at. And I believe that one of the biggest flaws is that the process seems to have been taken over by the politicians. Again, government. And when a process like that is held hostage by the political directorate or the political process, you have the kind of report that was sent into the parliament after they had, given the impression that they had gone all over the country, so to speak, and gotten the people's views and so on, and that they had aired it. And if they're honest to themselves, the committee will admit that they have not done enough, that they did not do enough to really sensitize people as to what constitutional reform is about in simple ways that people can understand. And that is the concern I had about a lot of lawyers, because sometimes when you have a lot of lawyers bunched together, you end up with a lot of legalese. Sorry, lawyers, I'm not picking at you, but you know your colleagues. Right? And so because of this lack of really interfacing with the people at the point where they should have been brought in, that report went to Parliament. And yes, they're gonna come and the report to underscore what I was saying about the government-centered nature of it. Of course, you know, on the thrust of the report, and you can see it on the CRC website and the parliamentary, you know, website. Because that report, yes, we want to do away with the king, the monarch, and we also want to get a president. But the president that they suggest is one that would be appointed by the prime minister, ratified by the opposition. Not much different from what obtains now, where the governor general himself, you know, becomes the person who does these the appointments on the recommendation, of course, of the government and the opposition. So you tell me now, you think that they're going to the politicians are going to do anything that is going to fundamentally disturb the status quo that has given them the kind of inordinate power that they have over the people of Jamaica? You tell me. The Constitution as it is presently structured makes the Prime Minister a virtual dictator over the government, appoints the cabinet people, he calls election whenever he wants. So if the cabinet is against what he's doing, he can just tell them, say, all right, we'll go to the polls. There's no fixed election date. A virtual dictator over the Jamaican people. And by just getting a ceremonial president who is not elected by the people and to force him out there and to give the impression that you know, he has a function, no different from the governor general's function of the iteration that we're trying to replace. Tell me that they are going to be so exercised to remove that, to remove from themselves the power that they have enjoyed, government-centered, to ensure that its status quo continues and that there is no fundamental change, no radical change that can move the people from the periphery to the center of the concern of the governance process, which is where it's all at. And I can say here and now that I will advocate that any process like that is retained, that so closely resembles what has been, is not a process that I would support, and I would agitate very strongly against it. The people must be brought into the center. But for the people to be brought to the center, you have to go out there, spend time with them, help them to understand what you're talking about, get their participation. They're very sensible. When you engage them and don't, and in the whole length and breadth of Jamaica, no matter, because there's no country. One of the insulting things is to call people country people. There's no country people anymore. There are no country people anymore. There's no country or rural area. Almost every district, people have their phones and they are participating in the lives of in the life of the country in one way or the other. So respect them and bring them into the process. talk to them, engage them, spend time. You just can't run through this thing. We're not going to have another chance at this, at least for a very long time, if we miss the importance of this moment. So let's do it right. And that is my big beef with the process. The report that went to Parliament, they had to show that they did something because they were given a budget and they want to say that hey, we didn't waste time. But I'm not sure when they look deeply at what they presented. And the fact, especially the fact that the people were not at the center of their concern at all, could never be. Because if the people were, they would have come up with something that says that every single representative of the people ought to be elected by the people, which means the prime minister must be elected by the people. If you have a republic, then the president, the executive president, must be elected by the people. That parliamentarians should not necessarily be cabinet members because they were elected to represent their constituencies, and they must spend time out there in the constituency really representing people's interests. There are 3 million people in the country. And out of that 3 million, you must can find a cabinet of, say, 20 people who are probably even brighter than the politicians that were elected to parliament who become cabinet members. What kind of nonsense is this? That we think that year in and year out, the political party that forms the government of the day and has the responsibility to put together a cabinet. You have people who have served in cabinet posts year after year as they get elected. Not going to be calling any name now or even any ministry. But you know who I'm talking about and what I'm talking about. That people have been elected and now, even in the opposition, you know that there's a certain spot designated for that particular person because that is what is understood to be his or her expertise, whether it is in technology, whether it is in tourism, or whether it is in agriculture. No cabinet member should necessarily be taken from the parliament. You're there to represent the people. Go out into the country and find 20 people of sound mind and patriotism who can do a good job and even better job than those who are posturing to get back in there, or those who are there now and wanting to retain the post in which they find themselves. Enough of that, man. That's what we're talking about. You think they would go out and tell the people that? What I just said? And what many of us in civil society believe? Which brings me not just to talk about the civil society aspect of it, but also the corporate Jamaica and all the organizations in Jamaica. The Jamaica Council of Churches, representing the churches, the umbrella grouping of churches. What do they have to say about constitutional reform? What does corporate Jamaica have to say about constitutional reform? This is not about, and that is why the government tends to run through things, because corporate Jamaica and other groups in the society are detach themselves from these very important things. And when a few civil society people now jump out there and start to agitate, then they're beaten down as loudmouths. And yet somebody has to challenge the process, or you'll end up with a situation where what obtained in the past continues, and then the impoverishment of the country, both economically and psychologically, and its soul gets hollowed out because we sat by and allow a process to push its way through. and we weren't engaged. So I want to make an appeal to corporate Jamaica. I want to make an appeal to, I know civil society is very much engaged, but I want to make a broader appeal to the groupings within the society, interested stakeholders, to come together, talk about these things. Let us hear these things being spoken of. There's never been a time when the possibility for communication has been greater than we have now with social media and so on, to get the word out. But I don't think we should sit and wait on the government to do it for us. We, as it's often been said, we the people have to do it. But before I end what I'm saying here with regard to constitutional reform, I just want to say something about the CCJ, the Final Appellate Court. I have spoken to this on other occasions. Because, because of the government-centric nature of the discourse that is taking place, the opposition has put forward, the opposition People's National Party has put forward a position that they would no longer participate in the reform process until they put on the agenda and send through as part of the suite of recommendations that were sent in that report, that the Caribbean Court of Justice must be our final appellate court. I sometimes wonder at where the opposition is on quite a number of things in the country, but this one really, gets you. I cannot understand this kind of obstinate insistence that the Caribbean Court of Justice has to be, and they will not participate. And it's very important that the opposition, in terms of the present arrangement that we have in governance, that they be a part of the process, and that is why they stymie the process, they stymie the process if they don't participate. They've not been going to meetings of the commission. And that is why the Prime Minister, in his budget presentation, was so frustrated that, he didn't make the direct charge, but, it is as if the PNP is trying to sabotage the process by their obstinacy in insisting on the CCJ as the final court. But why I find it very disturbing is that you cannot just determine that the CCJ has to be the final court when there are actually three options available to the people of Jamaica. One option is to retain the present arrangement with the Privy Council. The second option is the Caribbean Court of Justice, and not necessarily in that order. And the third option is for Jamaica itself to be the final appellate jurisdiction for the people of Jamaica. I have written many articles on this in my Observer column. And I have spoken, about this quite a bit in saying that, and I won't do it now because, of course, we won't have enough time. But just to say that there are three options. Mr. Golding, there are three options. And you cannot come now with that kind of Trumpian insistence that the CCJ has to be there or we won't be part of the process. There are three options. And I am not sure that if the people really get to weighed in on what an appellate court is and final jurisdiction is, what it means for them in their own little situation to get justice. If they really get to understand it, my own impression is that they may not even want to consider the Privy Council. Certainly, most people, I think, are against, in terms of the polls, are against the Privy Council continuing. But they might not even opt for the CCJ either. My bottom line is that if you're going to repatriate our appellate jurisdiction, bring it straight home to Jamaica. Don't let it land in some halfway house in Trinidad or Barbados or any other Caribbean country. Bring it home. Have respect for the people, the sovereignty of the people. You know, people who like to talk about sovereignty and we all want to be free and so on. And yet we cannot trust our own to say, let us develop the interior sense of our sovereignty so that we can do our own thing with a little tweaking, a lot of work, yes, still to be done with the justice system here. But the other places aren't without their problems too. Let us work on these things and bring it right home. That has been my long-standing thinking about this. So, Mr. Golding, let me say it again. There are three options. So why you think that it is your option alone that must hold the day to the extent that you keep your party away from participating in the process? Eh? Don't you think that that is asinine to insist on that? That can't be right. I don't know. I just can't understand that kind of stubborn insistence. It's as if, you know, it doesn't matter what other views come, whether you talk about retaining the Privy Council or you come to Jamaica or whatever. Those don't matter. CCJ or nothing at all. Nonsense, Mr. Golding. Nonsense. You know, I heard Mrs. Marva McDonald Bishop, who is the first female president of the Jamaica Court of Appeal. And she was talking about the legitimacy, I guess, within the context of all these talks about where the appellate jurisdiction should rest. I heard her talking about and defending the legitimacy of the appeal court, of the Jamaica Appeals Court. And she said something that was very interesting. I'm trying to record it here now, but she said something to the effect that in a period of, was it 50 years or so? Just a few cases, I think 60 cases were referred to the Privy Council for adjudication. And she lionized the appeals court and how important it has been in dispensing justice to the people of Jamaica. And I don't think that many people can gainsay that. I don't think that many people would take umbrage at that kind of thinking, because it is clear that most of the cases that go to the UK Privy Council, about 80% of them, I understand, are upheld by the law lords. So it means that we have to be doing something good in Jamaica, interpreting the laws, dispensing justice fairly. But like I said, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this. But I just wanted to make the point that Mr. Golding and the opposition, they need to understand we're not fools. And don't come thinking that you can ram something down our throat to accept. We're not going to do it. Let us have a fair and comprehensive discussion with the people of Jamaica about what they want, help them to understand it, what we're talking about, get them engaged, and in time, they will decide. And I'm sure that at the end of the day, if they really get to that understanding, they will say, Jamaica, Jamaica. That's where we want it. All right, so I'm going to break off there and go then to the next subject that I have here. And very quickly, the Jamaica Teaching Council. This is another thing, I don't know. I know the politics is very polarizing in Jamaica. And I know that whenever Jamaicans get engaged in politics, it is one of the things that really sometimes it entertains them but it certainly gives them a voice to really talk what is on their mind and so on. But sometimes the politics can really get in the way. And, let me just say, sometimes people say that, oh, they're just playing politics. What do politicians do? Politicians are not dentists, nor masons, nor parsons. They're gonna, but I understand what you mean by the play. Don't get me wrong. But politicians are gonna be politicians. They're gonna posture. They're gonna try to present their viewpoint. They're not going to be so accepting of the other viewpoint. Sometimes they come across as ludicrous when they challenge and oppose certain things, like what I think is happening, like I said earlier, about the CCJ and the opposition and their obstinacy. So I can understand that politicians, yes, they posture and they have to posture. But they can get over a boundary of stupidity that causes processes to be held up unnecessarily. And important things that should have been concluded for the benefit of the people of Jamaica are not done because we play political football with these things. And I believe that the Jamaica Teaching Council is one of these things that has suffered immensely from this political footballing that has taken place. For over 20 years, we have been discussing getting a Jamaica Teaching Council. And what is the Jamaica Teaching Council? It is just a council that sees to the registration of teachers, to bring some order into the teaching profession, to make sure that there is accountability on the part of teachers. Who could have a problem with that? And I don't think the well-thinking stakeholders have a problem with that. They might have a problem with the little nitty-gritty of the minutiae of what is being recommended in the bill. And by the way, the Jamaica Teaching Council bill was passed by the Senate, and it is now making its way through or it is supposed to be moving it through the lower house, House of Representatives, for final passage and signing by the GG and all the rest of it. But the Senate did pass it. And there were 38 amendments before it was passed. And the opposition itself participated in these amendments and in the passage of the bill. And now, later on you hear members of the party. I recall the shadow minister for education himself, Mr. Damien Crawford, suggesting new things that ought to be put inside there. And I wonder, what happened in the Senate? Isn't he a senator? Oh, what happened there? Anyway, but for over 20 years, this thing has been languishing, and it is time. It is just unfortunate, and I think it is just coincidental. I don't think it just was planned that the passage of it is now just going through, after 20 years, it's just now going through the throes of parliamentary procedure in the context of the general election that is pretty much in vogue right now. The campaigning is pretty much in vogue. So you can expect, and that's why I said I think it's coincidental. I want to think it is, because I don't think there was any veracity in bringing it on to score any political point on the part of the government, especially when you're dealing with a very contentious Jamaica teaching, JTA, Jamaica Teachers Association, who can, at the blink of an eye, if they disagree with you, they can just go and vote for the other side. And by the way, the JTA is not even so much an association as it is a union, the Jamaica Teachers Union. That's really what it is. And they're going to represent their interests. And so you wouldn't want to tick them off in the midst of a political campaign, which is taking place right now. And that's why I said it has to be coincidental. It just happened that it has been there, and we have a new minister, Ms. Dana Morris, sorry, who's been doing a very fantastic job, eloquent, speaks to the subject, knows what she's talking about. And she decided to grab the bull by the horn and say, we're going to do it. I guess election or no election. I'm more curious to you for doing that. But if you're not careful, the process can be derailed by politicking or political gimmickry. And we want to sound the gong on that. It is time for it to be passed. You'll never get a perfect bill. You'll never get a bill passed through Parliament with which everybody agree. But you have to come to a point and say enough is enough, and whatever we have to refine later on down and come with an amendment to the bill or whatever. But get it done. The teaching profession needs it. It is one of the premier institutions in the country. The children of Jamaica need it, and many teachers, or all the teachers, need it. So I said, let us, without any further delays, get it done. All right, that's gonna have to do it for this evening. It's just left for me to thank you for again for joining me. Remember, if you didn't get to watch this live, it is up on my YouTube channel, Mango Tree Dialogues, and a number of videos are there. So go there and listen at your own leisure. We don't pretend that we know everything, but there are some things that and you try to distill the issues so that hopefully people can have a better understanding of the issues, and you can challenge me. You can drop me a note, and WhatsApp me or whatever, and let me know what you think. This episode, of course, will be up live, so you can always go there and check it out. The subject for this evening's presentation is the constitutional reform process. Is it on life support? So see that and listen to it, and let me have a like. That goes a far way. And most importantly, share it with somebody else. Send it if you think it is important and enough to get out there and others to hear it. Go ahead, send it. And just left for me then to really thank you for being a part of the journey with me this evening. And in whatever you do, walk good. Have a good night. Bye-bye.